Imagine waking up on the first morning of 2025, turning on the news, and hearing a headline that seems almost unbelievable. 10 African nations can now enter the United States visa-free. No long interviews, no endless paperwork, no confusing denials stamped in red. Instead, with nothing more than a passport and a ticket, millions of Africans could step off a plane and walk into New York, Washington, or Los Angeles. No visa required. For decades, the US has made entry for African citizens one of the most difficult journeys in the world. Families were separated by bureaucracy. Talented students and entrepreneurs were lost in mountains of forms, and countless ordinary people, hopeful for opportunity, were turned away without reason. Yet now, with a single stroke of policy, Washington may change the rules of the game forever. But make no mistake, this is not just a humanitarian gesture. This is politics, this is strategy, and this is power. By opening its doors, even selectively, America is signaling to the world that visas are no longer just about travel. They are about influence. So, is this a gift of friendship, a long overdue recognition of Africa's importance? Or is it a calculated move, a tool in the great struggle for global dominance between Washington, Beijing, and Moscow? One thing is certain. If this policy is implemented, it will not only change lives, it will reshape the balance of power in the 21st century. More than just a policy. They call it the Continental Strategic Visa Waiver Initiative, CSVWI for short. Sounds technical, sounds bureaucratic, like just another policy buried deep in Washington's alphabet soup. But let us be clear, CSVWI is not simply a visa change. It is a weapon, a lever of influence, a chess move on the global board. Think about it. For years, America's greatest rivals, China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, have poured money, soldiers, and soft power into Africa. They built roads, drilled for oil, signed military agreements, and whispered promises of partnership. Now Washington answers not with tanks, not with treaties, but with something far more seductive: freedom of movement. The right to step on American soil with dignity, without humiliation. What is CSVWI really saying? It is saying, align with us and we open the gates of opportunity. Stand apart and you will remain outside, watching. It is not about compassion, it is about competition. It is about luring Africa's brightest minds, its engineers, doctors, musicians, and entrepreneurs, away from Beijing and Moscow and pulling them into Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and Hollywood. But ask yourself this: is it generosity or is it extraction? Is America offering Africa a seat at the table or a ticket out of its own future? Every passport stamped under CSVWI carries not only a name but a political calculation. Every flight boarding in Lagos, Johannesburg, or Nairobi is also a message to Moscow and Beijing. Africa is not yours to claim. CSVWI may look like a simple immigration reform. In truth, it is the opening salvo of a geopolitical contest that could define the century. Ladies and gentlemen, let us pause and ask the burning question: why these 10? Why not 50? Why not all of Africa? Because in geopolitics, nothing is random. Every country chosen is a piece on Washington's chessboard, handpicked, calculated, and measured for maximum effect. Take Nigeria, the giant of Africa. With its booming population and Silicon Valley-ready talent, Washington sees not just oil but brains. America does not want Nigeria drifting into China's digital orbit or Russia's energy embrace. A visa waiver here is not kindness, it is recruitment. Look at South Africa, BRICS member, voice of the global South. By lifting the visa barrier, Washington whispers, you belong with us, not with Beijing, not with Moscow. It is an invitation and a warning wrapped into one. Kenya, the loyal ally, host of US military bases. For decades, it stood guard against extremism in East Africa. Rewarding Kenya is a message to every other capital. Loyalty pays. Ghana, the darling of democracy, the land of Afrobeat and diaspora dreams. For Washington, Ghana is soft power gold. Let African Americans travel back and forth without friction, and suddenly the narrative of unity grows stronger. Rwanda, the so-called Singapore of Africa. Clean, disciplined, efficient. To Washington, Rwanda is an experiment. Can a tightly run state become a symbol of modern Africa, no matter the human rights critiques? From Senegal to Morocco, from Uganda to Botswana, each country is a chosen lever: strategic geography, rare minerals, military access, or political loyalty. And then there is Mauritius, the tiny island with a giant banking sector. Make no mistake, this isn't about tourists sipping cocktails. It's about money, capital flows, and controlling the arteries of finance. Each of these 10 nations carries a purpose. Each waiver granted is not a gift, but an investment. The US is planting flags, not on soil, but in passports. And through those passports, Washington redraws Africa's map of allegiance. Beyond travel, the real motives behind CSVWI. Now, let's strip away the diplomatic smiles and the glossy press releases. This is not simply about easing airport lines or stamping fewer passports. No, CSVWI is a battlefield dressed in the language of mobility. Ask yourself, why would the United States, a nation that has spent decades tightening borders, suddenly fling open a door for millions of Africans? Because visas are no longer just visas, they are weapons of influence. Every waiver is a silent handshake, every open gate a subtle chain binding one nation's destiny closer to Washington. Consider the timing. 2025 is not a coincidence. China's Belt and Road is surging. Russia is extending its military reach. Turkey and Iran are deepening their cultural influence. America has watched Africa become a contested prize. And so, Washington responds, not with tanks, not with treaties, but with an invitation. Come to us freely. Join our orbit. Choose our world over theirs. But let us be clear. This is not generosity. It is strategy cloaked as hospitality. By attracting Africa's brightest students, engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs, the US drains talent away from Lagos, Nairobi, and Kigali, redirecting it into Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and Washington's own machinery. It is a brain drain dressed up as opportunity. And yet the brilliance of CSVWI is its subtlety. No one will call it exploitation. It will be hailed as partnership. Africans will celebrate the chance to travel without barriers. Americans will debate the risks of migration. Meanwhile, the true game unfolds quietly. A continental competition where passports are pawns and airports are front lines. This is not about travel, friends. This is about power. And now comes the storm. A policy this bold, this unprecedented, could never pass quietly. The moment whispers of CSVWI began circulating in diplomatic halls, reactions erupted on both sides of the Atlantic. In Washington, conservatives sounded the alarm. This is a floodgate, they shouted. Visa-free access means uncontrolled migration, job competition, cultural clashes. They warned of overstays, of an America overwhelmed. Progressives fired back, not with applause but with moral outrage. Why, they asked, is Washington rewarding nations with shaky human rights records? Rwanda, Uganda? These are not democracies, they are strongholds of repression. For both camps, CSVWI became a paradox, too generous for one, too cynical for the other. And then, across Africa, the reactions rang with equal force, but in a different key. In Lagos, Nairobi, Accra, and Johannesburg, joy mixed with suspicion. Young people cheered. At last, the dream of studying in Boston, working in New York, investing in Los Angeles without the humiliation of endless visa interviews, it felt like liberation. For many, it was hope written on a boarding pass. But the elders, the analysts, the skeptics, they whispered caution. Is this freedom, they asked, or a trap? They feared brain drain, the siphoning of Africa's best and brightest into America's vast machine. They warned of sovereignty traded for convenience, of talent lost while Washington smiled, and yet, the symbolism was undeniable. For decades, Africans endured humiliation at consulates, endless paperwork, arbitrary denials, suspicion stamped onto their passports. Suddenly, Washington flips the script. No longer beggars at the gate, Africans now walk through the front door. So the world watches. Applause in the streets, protests in the press, debates in parliaments. CSVWI has achieved something rare, uniting hope and fear in a single breath. Because make no mistake, this is not just an immigration reform. This is a shockwave shaking two continents at once. The global chessboard, China, Russia, and the battle for Africa's future. Beneath the surface of CSVWI lies the true game, not immigration, but geopolitics. Washington is not merely opening its doors, it is moving pieces on the grand chessboard where empires rise and fall. For years, China has poured billions into Africa, railways in Kenya, ports in Djibouti, highways in Nigeria, mines in Zambia. Beijing calls it partnership. Critics call it debt diplomacy. Either way, China has built not just infrastructure but influence. And Russia, Moscow has marched into Africa with weapons, mercenaries, and promises of security where the West hesitated. In Mali, in the Central African Republic, in Sudan, Russian flags wave where American ones once stood. So Washington looked at the board and asked a hard question. How do you counter rivals who build roads and deploy troops? The answer: mobility. Not tanks, not treaties, but the power of a passport. CSVWI is a gambit, a soft power strike designed to lure Africa's talent, loyalty, and future into America's orbit. Think of it this way: a Nigerian engineer weighing job offers, Beijing or Silicon Valley; a Kenyan doctor choosing research, Moscow or Boston; a Ghanaian entrepreneur deciding where to launch, Shanghai or New York. CSVWI tilts the scale, turning possibility into preference. But make no mistake, this is not altruism, it is strategy. By granting visa-free access, the US is not merely rewarding allies, it is recruiting them. Every student who studies in America, every entrepreneur who builds in America, every leader who sees Washington as a gateway instead of Beijing, this is influence multiplied, power cemented. And what of China and Russia? They see the move for what it is, a challenge. For the first time in decades, Washington has placed Africa at the center of its strategic vision, not as a problem to solve, but as a prize to win. The chessboard is set, the pieces are moving, and Africa is no longer the side game. It is the board itself. Every bold move carries a shadow, and CSVWI is no exception. For all its glamour, for all the headlines about new partnerships, critics on both continents are already sharpening their knives. Why? Because beneath the promise lies a contradiction that is hard to ignore. In Washington, conservatives thunder, why should Africans walk into America without visas while Americans still face endless paperwork to enter their countries? They call it a double standard, a giveaway of sovereignty. Progressives fire back. Why reward regimes accused of corruption, repression, or human rights abuses? They see hypocrisy, not diplomacy. And ordinary Americans ask a simpler question. If the visa process was meant to protect us, why tear it down now? Across Africa, the skepticism is just as fierce. Some celebrate, finally dignity, finally respect. Others whisper suspicion. Is this really about friendship, or is it about draining Africa's brightest minds into American laboratories, hospitals, and tech companies? They see CSVWI as a pipeline, not of opportunity but of brain drain. What good is a visa-free policy, they ask, if it empties Africa of its talent and leaves behind only dependency? And then comes the hardest question of all: security. The US has long argued that visas are essential to screen threats, prevent terrorism, and control migration. Yet suddenly, with the stroke of a pen, those safeguards vanish for millions. Has the risk truly disappeared? Or has Washington decided that the geopolitical prize is worth the gamble? The contradiction cuts deep. America preaches equality, yet its own citizens still need visas for Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and beyond. Africa demands partnership, yet many fear CSVWI is just another form of control. Mobility as leverage, opportunity as bait. These double standards are not mere details, they are political dynamite. They threaten to ignite debates in Congress, parliaments, and living rooms across both continents. And the questions hang heavy in the air. Is this policy a bridge or a trap? Is it generosity or strategy wearing a mask? The answers will define not only the future of CSVWI, but the trust between Africa and America itself. Every great policy is a gamble, and CSVWI may be one of the boldest gambles of the 21st century. To its champions, this is nothing less than a new dawn. They imagine students from Nairobi walking into Harvard lecture halls without bureaucratic barriers. They see doctors from Lagos practicing in American hospitals, entrepreneurs from Kigali pitching in Silicon Valley, and artists from Accra dazzling Broadway. They call it the globalization of opportunity, a bridge between two continents long divided by suspicion. But critics see a different picture, one far darker. To them, CSVWI is not a bridge but a trapdoor. They warn that this is how nations lose control, not with guns or invasions, but with the silent flow of talent, culture, and influence. They ask, if Africa's brightest leave, who builds Africa's future? If America's doors swing wide, what happens when migration surges beyond control? The stakes are enormous. For the US, this could redefine its image, either as a visionary leader or as a reckless empire blinded by short-term strategy. For Africa, this could mark the beginning of true partnership, or the beginning of another century of dependency disguised as friendship. And here lies the drama. Both outcomes are possible. CSVWI could transform Africa into a stronger, more confident partner, integrated into global power on equal terms. Or it could hollow the continent out, leaving it weaker while Washington reaps the rewards. It could make America more dynamic and diverse, or fuel new political fires at home. What makes this moment historic is the uncertainty. We are not looking at a closed book, we are staring at a story still being written. One decision, one policy, one stroke of the pen could alter the balance of power between continents for generations. So we are left with the question that echoes from Washington to Abuja, from Cape Town to New York. Is CSVWI the beginning of a new era, or the most dangerous experiment of our time? Final conclusion. History is not written in silence. It is forged in decisions that ripple across continents, shaping the destiny of generations yet unborn. CSVWI is one such decision. What began as a technical visa reform has revealed itself as a seismic shift in global power, a move that could redraw the map of influence from Washington to Lagos, from Johannesburg to Beijing. Think of what is at stake. For Africa, this could be the long-awaited opening, a recognition that its people are not just laborers or resources to be extracted, but equal partners in the great human story. For the United States, this could be the tool that secures its role as the indispensable power, countering rivals who have sought to woo Africa with promises, pipelines, and ports. But the truth is this: no policy of such magnitude comes without risk. Visa-free travel could ignite innovation, or it could spark instability. It could open doors of partnership, or it could open wounds of inequality. The real question is not whether this policy will change the world, it will. The question is whether that change will uplift or divide, strengthen or weaken, liberate or entangle. This is why we cannot remain passive. Policies like CSVWI do not belong only to presidents, diplomats, or bureaucrats. They belong to us, the citizens, the voters, the diaspora, the students, the workers. Whether you live in New York, Nairobi, or Cape Town, this decision will echo into your life and your children's lives. So, as we stand at the threshold of 2025, the choice is ours. Will we see CSVWI as a gift, a trap, or a tool to be wielded wisely? The conversation does not end here. It begins with you. Share your thoughts, debate fiercely, question boldly. And if you want to follow every twist, every revelation in this unfolding story, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay with us. Because the future is not written yet, and together we will write it.